The captain didn't look up from the map when Sergeant Voss walked in. He just held out his hand, palm up, and waited. She set her qualification scores on the table. He picked them up, glanced at them for about 2 seconds, and put them face down on the stack of papers to his left. The stack he wasn't going to read today. Who requested a female on the sniper slot? He said, still not looking at her. Battalion S3, sir, based on the range scores from Bragg. He finally looked up. Not at her face. At the space slightly to the left of her face, the way some men do when they're deciding something and don't want you to see them deciding. That's a two-man hide. Cramped conditions. Multi-day deployment. I'm aware, sir. Your spotter will be Sergeant Pryor. He's been doing this for 6 years. He paused. He's going to have opinions. She didn't say anything to that. There wasn't anything to say that would help. She left his office with the assignment confirmed and nothing else. No briefing packet, no welcome. The score sheet stayed face down on his desk. Her name was Elaine Voss, 29 years old. She had grown up in central Montana, the kind of flat, wind-scoured country where the distances between things are large enough that you stop thinking of distance as an obstacle and start thinking of it as something to solve. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 8, not for sport, for the practical reason that the land they lived on sometimes had problems that needed handling from a distance. She had been in the Army for 7 years. She had spent 3 of those years attached to a Ranger battalion in a support role, doing work that required her to be invisible and precise and patient, and she had been good at it in the way that people are good at things they were built for, without knowing it until the opportunity arrives. She had not planned to end up here at FOB Salerno in eastern Afghanistan in the spring of 2012, assigned to a company that didn't want her. But planning, she had come to understand, was mostly a way of giving yourself something to be wrong about. Sergeant Pryor was sitting on an ammunition crate outside the equipment shed when she found him the next morning. He was cleaning a rifle that didn't need cleaning. She recognized the move. She had done it herself when she needed something to do with her hands while she thought. Voss, she said by way of introduction. He looked up. He had a wide, weathered face and the particular kind of stillness that comes from years of lying motionless in uncomfortable positions. He didn't say his name back. She already knew it, and he knew she knew it. You ever run a hide longer than 48 hours, he asked. 61 hours. Kunar Province, 2010. He looked back down at the rifle. Alone, with a spotter named Creech. He's at Fort Leavenworth now. She paused. Different reasons. Something shifted slightly in Pryor's expression, not warmth exactly. More like the beginning of recalibration. Captain Dunmore wants the first element observation brief by 1400, he said. I'll have the terrain overlay done by noon. You read Pashto? Enough to not get killed by a sign, he almost smiled. Almost. That's enough, he said. She turned to go. Voss. He said it to her back. She stopped. The guys in 3rd Platoon are going to give you a hard time. Don't take it personally. They give everyone a hard time, I know, she said. The difference is they're going to mean it personally with you. She nodded and kept walking. She already knew that too. 3rd Platoon was led by Staff Sergeant Coram, who had the kind of confidence that grows in men who have been right about most things and have stopped distinguishing between that and being right about everything. He wasn't a bad soldier. He was, by most measures, a good one. He had 3 tours behind him and the kind of practical intelligence that comes from surviving situations that shouldn't have been survived. He was also the kind of man who carried his assumptions about people like equipment, sorted, labeled, trusted, not examined. He found her at the range the afternoon she arrived. She was zeroing her rifle, a process that requires a particular quality of attention, and he stood off to the side until she finished the group and then spoke. Captain says you're running Overwatch on objective Kestrel. That's correct. Kestrel's at 3,200 meter, hide site picked is elevated but exposed on the eastern flank. He crossed his arms. You know what the wind does up there in spring? Variable. Predominantly southwest in the morning, shifting northeast after 1100, gusts up to 18 knots in the afternoon. He blinked, just once, quickly, the way people do when an answer is more complete than they expected. You've been studying the meteorological reports, he said, since the assignment came through. He studied her for a moment, not the way the captain had, not dismissively, more the way someone looks at a lock they're not sure they have the right key for. We lost a spotter on this objective 6 weeks ago, he said. Conditions shifted faster than the model predicted. Wind came out of the north at 22 knots in a target window. The shot missed. The spotter called it wrong. She waited. I'm not saying that to scare you, he said. I'm saying it because that's the environment. I understand. He nodded slowly. We'll see, he said, and walked away. She turned back to the range, fired 3 more rounds. The group was exactly where she wanted it. The hide took 9 hours to build. They inserted before dawn, moving through a dry creek bed that wound up the eastern slope of the ridgeline south of the objective. Pryor moved well. She noticed that. He was methodical without being slow, and he read the ground the way experienced people do, not looking at what was directly in front of him, but at what was 20 meters ahead, planning the next 3 steps while executing the current one. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say that the terrain wasn't already saying. The hide site was a natural shelf in the rock face, partially concealed by a fractured boulder the size of a pickup truck. Pryor had selected it well. The sight lines to the objective were clear, the angle minimized exposure. The only problem was the eastern flank, exactly as Coram had said. A gap in the rock where a sustained wind would create unpredictable turbulence through the scope. She spent 40 minutes on the position before she said anything. We need to shift the primary position 4 meters north, she said. There's a secondary shelf up there. Tighter, but the rock will break the eastern deflection. Pryor studied the shelf she was indicating. He had a way of looking at things that involved his whole body, not just his eyes, a slight lean, a stillness, like he was listening as much as looking. Tighter means I'm closer to you, he said. Limited movement, I know. If we need to transition out fast, we won't be transitioning out fast regardless of position, not from this ridge. He was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his pack. 4 meters north, he said. It took them another 3 hours to rebuild the position on the new shelf. Neither of them complained about it. That wasn't the kind of thing either of them was inclined to do. The mission was 3 days of observation before any action phase. 3 days of watching a compound complex in the valley below, cataloging movement patterns, vehicle traffic, personnel signatures, dull work that required a specific kind of discipline. The ability to stay alert through long stretches of nothing, to not let the mind go flat, to keep the attention all sharp and ready for the moment when something happened. Voss had always been good at waiting. It was possibly the most undervalued skill in her profession. Most people thought the job was about the shooting. The shooting, if everything went right, was maybe 4 seconds of a 72-hour evolution. Everything else was patience with a purpose. Pryor was a good observer. He called his grids precisely and annotated his logs with a density of detail that she respected. He also had, she discovered, a habit of humming very quietly to himself when he was bored. Not a tune exactly, more a low periodic sound like something electronic cycling. She didn't mention it. It didn't interfere with anything. On the second morning, he asked her something. Where'd you learn to shoot? Montana? Military? Before that? Your dad? She thought about that for a moment. The question was simple, but the answer had layers she didn't feel like excavating here, on a rock shelf at altitude, with 300 meters of exposure below them. Partly, she said. He didn't push. That was another thing she respected about him. My grandfather taught me, he said after a while, not looking up from the scope. He was a Marine, Korea. He didn't talk about the war at all, but he would take me to the range every Saturday for 4 years. Never explained why. She adjusted the focus on her scope. A vehicle had entered the compound below, a white pickup, which was nothing unusual in this part of the country, but she logged it anyway. Maybe he didn't have to explain it, she said. No, Pryor said. I guess he didn't. On the third afternoon, the situation changed. The radio traffic that came through at 1347 was clipped and urgent. A 4-vehicle patrol from 3rd Platoon had turned off Route Michigan onto a secondary road to investigate a reported weapons cache. The secondary road had taken them into a narrow draw, 2 kilometers northeast of the FOB. The draw had 1 entrance and 1 exit. Someone had been waiting. The patrol was pinned, 2 vehicles disabled, 1 confirmed casualty. 8 men in the draw trying to make themselves very small behind vehicles that were not large enough for the purpose. Voss heard the traffic and was already moving her scope before Pryor had the map out. Northeast Ridge, she said, 300 meters above the draw. There has to be an observation post up there for this to be coordinated. Pryor had the map. His finger found the terrain feature she was describing. That's 2,200 meters from our current position. 2180, she said, give or take. He looked up at her. Can you make that shot? He said, not doubting. Genuinely asking. She had already been working the numbers in her head. Not just the distance, the angle. She was shooting slightly downhill to a target that was itself elevated relative to the valley floor, which compressed the bullet's apparent trajectory in ways that didn't follow standard drop tables. The wind was out of the southwest at approximately 11 knots at their position. But the draw was oriented differently, and the air column above it would behave differently from what she was reading at the hide. There was a ridge between them and the target that would create a Venturi effect. An acceleration of wind through the gap that would push the bullet right during the middle of its flight, before the target side air could push it back. She had to account for a push in one direction at 300 meters and a correction in the other at 1800. This was the part that most people didn't understand about long-range shooting. It wasn't about holding steady and squeezing the trigger. It was about constructing a model of the air, an invisible architecture of pressure and velocity, and threading a projectile through it. "I can make it," she said, "but I need 10 minutes. The patrol has? I know what the patrol has. Give me 10 minutes. He got on the radio. She put her eye to the scope. The target was there. She could see the muzzle flash even at this distance, small periodic bloom of light from a position in the rocks on the northeast ridge. Whoever it was, they were well placed. They had chosen a position that was nearly impossible to approach from the draw and difficult to engage from the patrol's angle. From her angle, it was different. She went through the process methodically. Wind reading at the hide, 11 knots southwest. Estimated wind reading at mid-trajectory through the gap. She calculated 20 to 24 knots of deflection, right to left from her perspective. Wind at target. The ridge would create a shadow, probably reduced 4 to 6 knots. Temperature, 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Altitude, approximately 7,400 feet above sea level, which thinned the air and reduced drag, which meant the bullet would fly flatter and slightly faster than standard. Inclination to target, she measured it with her inclinometer. 11 degrees downward from horizontal. The downward angle was the complication. When you shoot downhill, gravity acts on a shorter component of the bullet's flight than the full distance suggests. The effective gravity distance, what old-time shooters called the slope dope, was something like the horizontal distance, not the line of sight distance. At 11 degrees, the cosine of the angle was approximately 0.98, nearly flat. The correction was modest, but not nothing. She dialed her adjustments. Then she waited, watching the wind indicators she had set, small pieces of thread attached to the rock in front of her, reading the immediate air. Behind her, Pryor was relaying information to the patrol. Hold position, suppressive fire on the eastern wall of the draw to keep the target's attention, wait for the crack of the shot. The wind dropped slightly at 1409. Not dead calm, nothing here was ever dead calm, but a momentary steadying, the kind of pause that sometimes happens between gusts. She took it. The shot broke cleanly. She tracked the bullet's flight in the scope. Not the bullet itself, which traveled faster than sight, but the trace of disturbed air it left, a faint shimmer that only exists at long distances and only in certain light conditions. She watched it curve right through the gap in the ridge, slightly more than she had calculated, and then straighten on the far side. The muzzle flash on the northeast ridge did not appear again. Pryor was already on the radio. The patrol extracted without further casualties. The confirmed count later was 8 men out of the draw who would not have come out the same way without the shot from the ridgeline. There was some debate about that in the after-action review, the kind of debate that happens in rooms where people are trying to assign credit in a way that makes the spreadsheet work out right. But the tactical reality was not particularly ambiguous. Voss and Pryor held their position for another 4 hours, protocol requiring they stay in place until darkness before attempting extraction. The radio chatter had quieted. The valley below was still. She lay on the cold rock shelf and watched a pair of birds, she couldn't tell what kind, circle in the thermal above the far ridge, rising in slow spirals without effort. That was 2,180 meters, Pryor said. He wasn't looking at her, he was looking at the valley. 2183, she said. I measured it after. He was quiet for a moment. I've never seen that. She didn't say anything. He stopped, started again. I've run Overwatch on 11 deployments. I've never seen anyone make that adjustment in real time. The Venturi correction alone. The thread indicators helped, she said. The thread indicators are a tool. You still have to read them. She shifted slightly, taking some weight off her left elbow. The rock had been cutting into it for the last 2 hours. She hadn't said anything about it. My grandfather showed me something once, she said. We were shooting prairie dogs at 800 yards. Wind was doing something weird because of a tree line 200 meters downrange. He said, "Don't fight what the air is doing, understand what it's doing and use it." Pryor thought about that. He was a good teacher. He was, she said. The debrief happened the following morning. Captain Dunmore ran it. Staff Sergeant Coram was there, and the platoon sergeant from 3rd, and the battalion intelligence officer, who sat in the corner and typed things without looking up. Dunmore walked through the sequence of events in his characteristic way, flat, factual, no dramatics. He noted the confirmation of the patrol's extraction. He noted the confirmed kill on the northeast ridge. He noted the shot distance. He paused when he read that number. 2,183 meters, he said. Nobody said anything. He stopped, looked up from the paper. He looked at Voss for the first time with his full attention, not the peripheral awareness he'd been managing since she arrived. That's a significant distance. Conditions were favorable, she said. Wind was variable. Yes, sir. He held her eyes for a moment. Something was working behind them. Recalculation, she thought. The same thing that had been working behind Pryor's eyes on the ridge, but slower. Some men recalibrate faster than others. It depended on how invested they were in the original calibration. Good work, Sergeant, he said, and moved on to the next item. It wasn't much. It was 2 words and then a pivot to something else. But she noticed that he retrieved her qualification scores from his desk that evening and actually read them. Coram caught her outside the TOC afterward. He didn't offer a hand. He stood in front of her in the way men who are reassessing someone stand, not the arms-crossed posture of earlier, but hands at his sides, weight slightly forward. "I told you the eastern flank was a problem," he said. "You did? You found a different position?" "We did," she said. Pryor saw the secondary shelf. Coram looked at her steadily. "He said it was your call." She didn't say anything to that. "The Venturi effect off that ridge," Coram said. "The shot would have drifted right. You accounted for it?" "I tried, it didn't drift." "No," she said. "It didn't." He nodded slowly. The way someone nods when they've been wrong about something and have made a private accounting of it. He didn't apologize. She didn't expect him to. The accounting was the thing. The rest was just language. "Get some rest." He says, "We're back on rotation in 48 hours. He walked away. She watched him go. 3 weeks later, the battalion surgeon cleared her for another deployment cycle. She was at the range when the orders came through. Not zeroing this time, just shooting, the way she did when she needed to think about something that wasn't shooting. Pryor found her there. "Kestrel 2, he said. 14 days. Same ridge system. Different objective." She finished the group, set the rifle down. "What's the longest confirmed shot on record from that ridge system?" He thought about it. "Officially, 1,700 and something. 2009, she picked up the rifle. 14 days, she said. He sat down on the bench next to her, didn't say anything else. She fired the next group and the one after that, and the late afternoon light came down at a low angle across the range and turned the dust into something almost gold, and neither of them had anything more to say about it. There was paperwork later. There always is. A citation request that moved up the chain and came back down altered. The language softened in ways that citations get softened when certain names are attached to them. A recommendation that got downgraded. An acknowledgement that arrived, eventually in the form of a letter with a bronze star enclosure, the administrative kind, which meant it came through the mail and not in a ceremony. She read the letter twice, folded it, put it in the box where she kept things she didn't need to look at often but didn't want to lose. The brass casing from the 2,183-meter shot was already in there. She'd kept it without planning to, picked it up off the hide floor during the extraction. More habit than intention. The letter went on top. She thought about what Pryor had said on the ridge. I've never seen that. Not congratulations exactly. Just observation. An honest accounting of what had happened. That was the thing about this work. The work itself didn't require anyone to believe in it beforehand. You could disbelieve in someone completely. You could arrange the furniture of your expectations in a way that left no room for them. And then the moment would arrive, and the air would do what the air did, and the bullet would go where the calculations said it would go. And the disbelief didn't have any jurisdiction over the physics. She had understood that from the first time she fired a rifle at a distance that seemed impossible and hit what she was aiming at. The distance doesn't care what you think of the person holding the rifle. Neither does the wind, neither does the math. She put the box away and went to the briefing for Kestrel 2.